This past weekend in Sao Paulo, Brazil, the 2026 Pokemon Go Latin American International Championships were held. This was a massive tournament with trainers flying in from all around the globe to compete for the crown. This was the first limited meta tournament ever held in competitive Pokemon Go, so the teams will look quite a bit different from what you're used to seeing. At the end of a long weekend of battling, we crowned a first-time international champion, Nighttime Clasher. Nighttime Clasher's team consisted of Medicham, Matang, Gyarados, Dugong, Pertinator, and Oranguru. This team was a force to be reckoned with at this tournament. Nighttime Clasher ended up taking home the crown, but two of his friends, Out of Pocket and Septile Ice, ended up placing 5th and 6th respectively, running the exact same team. In today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a set from Septile Ice, a set from Out of Pocket, and finally the best games from Nighttime Clasher as he claimed the crown of 2026 Pokemon Go Latin America International Champion. The first matchup we'll take a look at is Septile Ice versus Desync. Desync's team has Togetic, Oranguru, Turtonator, Gyarados, Runerigus, and Medicham. Both battlers lock in, and it's a good lead for Septile Ice, Dugong into Gyarados. But the Medicham safe switch from Desync is a problem for Septile Ice, as he does not have a good counter on the line of 3 that he's brought. So he's forced to bring in Gyarados, but Gyarados is a very frail Pokemon. Even a resisted Dynamic Punch from Medicham hits incredibly hard. Medicham was a force to be reckoned with in this meta due to its incredible bulk and, thanks to Psycho Cut, incredibly fast pacing. Desync, after landing the Dynamic Punch, will opt for the slightly less harder hitting Ice Punch. Ice Punch is going to be no-shielded by Septile Ice. Septile Ice gets to the crunch, but if Desync wants, Desync will have the ability to shield, Psycho Cut down, and flip switch advantage. Desync needs this Medicham energy to be able to KO the Dugong, but Septile's going to bring in his own Medicham. This is effectively a wall to Desync's energy. Desync banks 2 Dynamic Punches, brings back out the Gyarados, and that is going to rebait out the Dugong. This is important for Desync, as Desync needs to be able to KO the Dugong to try and set up the Togetic to sweep at the endgame. Crunch lands onto the Dugong, doing some pretty nice damage. The Dugong will immediately get to apply big damage and a guaranteed attack drop with Icy Wind. Icy Wind lands onto that Gyarados, putting that Gyarados very, very low. Very nice overfarm from Desync, as he will fire off the Crunch right before Septile Ice is able to make another Icy Wind. The Crunch is going to land. Septile Ice going to look for a farm down, but is unable to get there. Septile Ice has to decide, is it worth preserving the energy? Septile says yes. The shield goes up, and he switches into Medicham to snipe down. Medicham has a huge energy head start, and it's going to need it because in the back is Togetic. A Fairy type into your Fighting type, typically not going to go too well, but with the energy management on this Medicham, Septile Ice is very far ahead in this matchup. Medicham will spam out Ice Punch after Ice Punch, but Togetic still does not have to shield. Togetic is extremely bulky, but there's already a 3rd Ice Punch locked and loaded for Septile Ice. Septile is going to force the final shield away from Desync. Desync has so much loaded energy. Desync decides to not go for the bait. Septile Ice thinks through his options. He puts up the shield. That's a massive call. He's going to switch into the Dugong and snipe down the Togetic. Togetic unable to make the Dazzling Gleam. Icy Wind will pick up the knockout. And all that's left for Desync is the Medicham and all of its loaded energy. Desync is going to go for an undercharge on this Ice Punch, trying to get a Psycho Cut down. That's not going to pick up the knockout. He needs as much energy as he possibly can, but the Dugong is just too bulky. Septile Ice hangs on 1 HP. Icy Wind KOs the Medicham, and that's a Game 1 win for Septile Ice. The trainers lock in for game number 2, and it's a disastrous lead for Septile, leading Dugong into Medicham. Septile going to farm up energy, switch into Medicham, gets the catch of the Dynamic Punch, and also sneaks through a Psycho Cut. Dynamic Punch not going to do much, and now out comes Runerigus. Runerigus for this meta were running Brutal Swing and Rock Tomb. Since they opted against Shadow Ball, Runerigus actually didn't have a lot of charge move pressure against Medicham. Medicham, with this incredibly fast pacing, was still able to honestly be a pretty big threat to Runerigus, as these Ice Punches really add up. Brutal Swing no-shielded by the Medicham, and that's a CMP tie, so Medicham is locked in with the Ice Punch against the Runerigus. Runerigus will put up the shield, going to attempt to try and go for a farm down. Septile Ice trying for a snipe once again, but Desync has great reaction time, firing off the Rock Tomb. Septile Ice more than happy to no-shield because he knows that the Medicham is about to get brought back in, and he's going to get knocked out by a Dynamic Punch anyway. So he will fire off the Icy Wind at the Medicham. Unfortunately for him, it's a debuff to Icy Wind due to that Rock Tomb, so it's not going to hit particularly hard. Medicham, full sending Dynamic Punch. Septile Ice, gonna let this through. Medicham takes the knockout, and down goes Dugong. Septile Ice reveals his closer, and his closer is Oranguru. This is a debuffed Dynamic Punch, but he's still going to put up the shield because he's going to have to shield something in this game. Oranguru going to try and take the knockout with the Trailblaze. The Medicham's low enough that Trailblaze would be able to pick up the KO. Beasting to no shields, Trailblaze takes the knockout, and now there's a boosted Oranguru on the loose in this endgame. Septile Ice does still have a Medicham if he needs to catch. The Medicham does not have a lot of energy. In comes Gyarados. Gyarados going to be immediately put under pressure from a boosted Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing is no shielded by Desync, but that is a lot of HP lost on the Gyarados. Gyarados farming up a ton of energy, building up way past the crunch, going for the Aqua Tail bait. Septile Ice thinks it through, puts up the shield. That's a big call. Gyarados tries to get a move, but does not get there. In comes the Runerigus, and Runerigus has nothing it can do. Back-to-back Brutal Swings are loaded. A Brutal Swing will not be enough to KO Oranguru. Oranguru takes the knockout with the second Brutal Swing, and Septile Ice is going to advance to losers round 5 by a score of 2-0. The next match we'll be taking a look at is Out of Pocket versus LNDS Bernardo. Bernardo's team has some familiar picks with the Metang, Turtonator, Gyarados, and Oranguru, but Celio and Togekiss are a little more outside the norm. Battlers lock in for game number 1, and it's a pretty neutral lead. Gyarados into Oranguru. Gyarados farms up to the crunch, baits with the Aqua Tail, stone cold bait call from Bernardo as he no shields and immediately looks to boost up his attack with the Trailblaze. Out of Pocket, no shields to Trailblaze, that's going to land, dealing some pretty significant damage to the Gyarados. Gyarados now going to be very, very low on health, but does make it to the crunch. Crunch would knock out the Oranguru, but Bernardo more than happy to let the Oranguru go in exchange for farm. In comes Metang looking for a Fury Cutter down and getting the Fury Cutter down. This is a ton of energy gain for Bernardo in exchange for basically no HP lost. Pocket is forced to bring in his own Metang, as Metang is going to wall off the energy from an opposing Metang. This forces Bernardo to throw Gyro Ball. Gyro Ball is single resisted. It's not going to be doing a lot of damage, but the thing to watch for is the neutral Fury Cutters. Look at the Fury Cutters go, just tearing through the health bar of the opposing Metang, and suddenly Pocket is below half HP. Pocket will fire off his own Gyro Ball, taking Bernardo below half as well, but my goodness, the energy advantage for Bernardo is so evident. Bernardo already at another Gyro. That's going to be connecting. That's going to get Pocket deep into the red HP. Pocket will fire off a Gyro Ball of his own, and then we should see a simultaneous switch. Pocket going to be sending in the Dugong. It's the Gyarados for Bernardo, the battle of the water types. In the static matchup, this is a winning endgame for the Dugong, as Dugong is able to consistently debuff the Gyarados, reducing his damage output more and more. Pocket puts up the shield, but Disaster strikes the crunch debuff. It's only a 20% chance to occur, but it happens at the absolute worst time. This means that Bernardo still has some really nice damage output with the Gyarados. Gyarados not going to bait, going for the crunch. Pocket is going to no shield, holding on to that final protect shield. The crunch lands, that's some pretty solid damage. No crunch debuff this time. Bernardo is forced to burn the final protect shield. If he lets it go, he'll have no health on anything, and Gyarados will continue the farm. Gyarados farming up almost to 2 Aqua Tails, and Bernardo will go for the bait. Aqua Tail would not take the knockout here, but the Dragon Breath after might do it. Pocket puts up the shield. Bernardo switches into Metang and snipes down the Dugong's energy. That big farm from Bernardo earlier paying dividends as Pocket loses his charge attack. Pocket gets the farm down with Metang. It's a race to the charge move, but Bernardo is just so far ahead. Bernardo gets the Aqua Tail. A brilliantly played game from Bernardo. Lost the lead, but the energy advantage on Metang was everything, and Pocket's down 1-0. Unfortunately, things are not getting any easier for Pocket in the next match, as Pocket ends up leading Medicham into Metang. This is arguably Medicham's worst meta matchup, as Metang very comfortably absorbs 2 dynamic punches and can always win all even shield scenarios. Medicham is going to be farming up, unleashing dynamic punch, but the moment this lands, you'll see it does not put Metang into the yellow. Metang will comfortably be able to hang on. Another dynamic comes out from Pocket, another no shield from Bernardo. Dynamic lands, and Pocket gets aggressive. He sends out the Dugong. Metang going to immediately chip down the Dugong with a Psyshock. Psyshock is going to land, doesn't do a ton of damage. Pocket would rather take the damage here, but Metang rebanks a Psyshock for later. Bernardo so good with the energy management, and now he sends out Celio. Celio is very, very bulky. It's going to be able to absorb these drill runs no problem. However, the downside of Celio is in this matchup, Celio is forced to go for Body Slams. Body Slam is going to do basically no damage to a Pokemon as bulky as Dugong. Dugong gonna be no shielding, Body Slam connects, and he's getting aggressive. The pivot once again into Metang. Metang gonna be hit with the Surf, and Surf will do some pretty sizable damage, but Pocket is gonna no shield. Switch clock not yet up for Bernardo. He's gonna rebank the Surf. In comes Gyarados, but now in this game, it seems Pocket has learned from the previous one. It's Pocket with the energy lead Metang. Metang fires off the Psyshock at the Gyarados. There's an O-Shield. Pocket immediately going for Psyshock number 2, and Bernardo is forced to put up a shield. Bernardo has massive banked energy on his other Pokemon, but so does Pocket. Bernardo building up past the crunch. He's baiting with the Aqua Tail. Pocket thinks about it, gets the bait call right. Metang survives, and there's the snipe with Dugong. Now Bernardo only has one Protect Shield left. Is he going to use it here? No, and Dugong takes the knockout onto Gyarados. Back in comes the Celio, but Celio is not going to be able to pick up the KO with the Body Slam. Body Slam will get this Dugong very, very low, but what it will not do is take the knockout. There's a switch into Metang. Bernardo doing everything he can to try and preserve this Celio. Drill Run is going to be undercharged. It still picks up the knockout. Celio looking for a full farm down and gets it. Pocket still has 2 Protect Shields to work with, and in comes Medicham. Pocket still has not shielded anything in this match. Does he call it once again? He does! He no shields, calling the Body Slam. Pocket calling baits left, right, and center, and Bernardo is left at a loss. Bernardo shields up Dynamic Punch. Pocket still has the Metang. In comes Metang, and Bernardo will finally get to pull a shield away from Pocket in this game, but it's too little, too late. Metang gets the Psyshock. That's easily going to be taking the knockout, and what a game from out of Pocket. Dancing in and out of matchups, saving charge attacks, desyncing switch timers, and he's able to find a way and force a game 3. Battlers lock in for game number 3, and it's a perfect mirror lead. Gyarados versus Gyarados. Who will flinch first? It's going to be Pocket getting aggressive, banking a ton of energy on Gyarados, catching the crunch onto Dugong, and sneaking a free Ice Shard as well. The crunch debuffs once again. Pocket getting very bad luck in this set. Bernardo rebanks the crunch and goes for a defensive pivot as he sends in the Celio. Celio can't really do a lot of damage here, but the reason you switch this in is the double resist to the Ice Shards, and the fact that 2 drill runs will not come anywhere close to taking the knockout. Celio is going to be firing off the Body Slam, denying Dugong's energy. Dugong going to be no shielding as Body Slam will not knock out, but the switch timer comes up. Back in comes the Gyarados for Pocket. Celio will launch Body Slam and an instant no shield from Pocket, as this would do less than a potential crunch that's banked on the Gyarados. Gyarados gonna fire off the crunch. Celio still stuck on the field. Switch timer not yet up for Bernardo. Crunch will land. Crunch does not get the debuff. Celio trying to get to the Body Slam, but does not get there. The energy lead on Gyarados proves to be just too oppressive. Aqua Tail launched at the Celio. Celio barely cannot hang on. And now Bernardo brings in his own Gyarados. Bernardo realizes an Aqua Tail could be reached by Pocket, so Bernardo is going to deny that energy by firing off the Aqua Tail. Pocket does have quite a bit of energy on this Dugong, and in it comes. Dugong could take the knockout with the Icy Wind. Bernardo will put up the shield, and it's going to be Turtonator in the back. Turtonator is on Incinerate, and the Incinerates are adding up quite a bit. Pocket has to decide, is this -1 Aqua Tail worth a shield? Pocket shields at the absolute last second. Gyarados will make it to a crunch, but Bernardo's not going to throw it while debuffed. Instead, Bernardo is going to bank that energy for later and send in Metang. The unfortunate thing for Bernardo in this situation is Bernardo did not do enough damage to put it into Psyshock range. So for Pocket, this is a very safe no shield. Psyshock will just simply not come close to taking the knockout. Incinerates adding up so much onto the Metang. Metang gonna be hit with the Brutal Swing, and this is some pretty significant super effective damage. Metang hangs on, not by much. In comes Dugong, sniping down, and now this is a game win for Pocket. Ice Shard goes through, down goes the Gyarados, and Pocket advances in a very close series. We now turn our attention to the eventual winner of the tournament, Nighttime Clasher. I'm going to be showcasing some of the best games that Nighttime Clasher had on stream throughout the weekend. We're going to start off with the Group G Winners Finals against Dialab. Dialab's team consists of Dugong, Medicham, Oranguru, Runerigus, Metang, and Gyarados. Runerigus' energy hits pretty hard into a lot of Pokemon and Nighttime Clasher's team, so as they lock in for this matchup, it's no surprise that Dialab has brought that Runerigus in the back. The lead matchup is a bit of a stalemate though, Metang against Metang. We've seen the Metang mirror before, and we know it's a bit of a slow one. Fury Cutters add up quite a bit, but Gyro Ball is not going to hit particularly hard. As this mirror lead plays out, it's absolutely worth taking a peek at the backlines. We know Dialab has Runerigus, and he's paired it up with Gyarados. For Nighttime Clasher, it's Dugong and Oranguru, so the backlines are decently neutral. Nighttime Clasher going to be full charging Gyro Ball. Gyro Ball will connect, and it's Dialab who's going to make the first pivot as in comes Runerigus. Runerigus can hit for super effective damage with Brutal Swing, but the important thing to know about the Runerigus-Oranguru matchup is that 2 Brutal Swings do not take the knockout. Oranguru still in the green. This means that Oranguru will be able to survive the next Brutal Swing. Nighttime Clasher looking to ramp up his damage, going for the super effective Trailblaze, the no shield from Dialab, and that is going to do some pretty significant damage. Nighttime Clasher, again with the no shield, has to hope that 2 boosted Confusions will be enough to KO the Runerigus. Farming up here, Runerigus is able to hang on. Runerigus makes a last-second Brutal Swing, but this meta is not about switch advantage, so Nighttime Clasher is going to let this go, because what Nighttime Clasher wants is going to be the farm. In comes Metang. Metang going to be answered with Gyarados. Gyarados will get outpaced due to the small energy head start on the Metang. Shield comes up, and now Nighttime Clasher can look to pivot and send in the Dugong. In comes Dugong. Dugong up a shield, but down a ton of energy. We've seen quite a few crunch debuffs so far. Will we see another? Nighttime Clasher puts up the shield. Moment of truth. Do we see the debuff? We do not see the debuff, and that is a pretty good swing for Nighttime Clasher. Dialab will fire off the crunch. This is going to be an O-shield from Nighttime Clasher, as he's going to look to continue to farm this Gyarados closer and closer to Icy Wind range. Now Gyarados will be hit with the Icy Wind. This will not knock out, but it's going to be getting the Gyarados very low. The no-shield from Dialab. Gyarados hangs on, not by much. In comes Metang. Metang is going to fire off the Psyshock. Psyshock, however, will not take the knockout, but the bait is successful, as Nighttime Clasher is going to put up the shield. Metang into Metang. Dialab is going to make the last second Psyshock. Dialab going to go for an undercharge, as he does not want to take the knockout. The undercharge is a success. Dialab lets himself get farmed down, because he needs energy on the Gyarados. If he has any chance in this game, it's Gyarados getting to a crunch. Gyarados gets there, but this crunch would need to put the Dugong into 1 Shadow Claw range. Crunch is going to land onto the Dugong. Dugong survives. It's too healthy. Shadow Claw does not take the knockout, and Nighttime Clasher is going to take the win. We move to the next match. Battlers get locked in, and it's going to be Turtonator into the Runerigus. Immediate save switch by Nighttime Clasher into the Gyarados, and Gyarados will be answered with the Dugong. We've seen this matchup play out quite a bit. Gyarados, especially if it is a high rank, actually does pretty nicely against Dugong, because if Dugong tries to farm down after going for the Icy Wind, then Gyarados can actually make double crunch into an Aqua Tail and win the zeros. So that does force the Dugong to actually throw energy. Dugong gonna fire off that Icy Wind, applying that debuff. Gyarados is very low, but Nighttime Clasher is very close to making a crunch plus an Aqua Tail. Can he get there? He did take some damage from the Shadow Claws from that Runerigus. Nighttime Clasher saves the Gyarados, pivots into the Dugong, and Dialab will immediately fire off the Drill Run. This Drill Run will help shore up the Metang-Dugong matchup, as typically, Metang actually loses the zeros there, because Metang just can't do enough damage before double Drill Run is reached. But with that Drill Run being thrown, now, suddenly, it's a brand new matchup for the Metang, as Metang can actually knock out with the back-to-back Psyshock. Dugong will go for the Drill Run. No shield from the Metang. That's really nice damage, but unfortunately, Nighttime Clasher is not going to be able to make it to the second Drill Run, as a perfect overfarm from Dialab will deliver the KO. What Nighttime Clasher is hoping for is to win this game on the back of Turtonator farm. He brings in Turtonator, incinerates, starting to add up. The Psyshock is reached. Dialab banks it for later. He's going to be sending out the Runerigus. Runerigus is behind on energy, though. This could get tricky. Runerigus puts up the shield as Brutal Swing comes through. These incinerates, they slowly add up, getting the Runerigus closer and closer to Brutal Swing range. Speaking of Brutal Swing, Dialab goes for the Brutal Swing bait, and it is successful, grabbing a shield from Nighttime Clasher. Nighttime Clasher going for perfect charge attack timing, firing off 1 Incinerate and the Brutal Swing. And if you remember from earlier, Nighttime Clasher saved the Gyarados. In comes the Gyarados. He makes it to the Aqua Tail, sniping down the Runerigus, and that's going to seal Dialab's fate. Aqua Tail lands. Runerigus does not hang on. In comes the Dugong. Dugong does get a bit of an energy head start, but in comes the Turtonator. Turtonator denying that energy with the Brutal Swing. Dilap sets down the phone as he knows there's no way out. Turtonator takes the knockout. In comes Matang. Matang's Psyshock would not even take the knockout, but Nighttime Clasher still has the shield. So the shield goes up, Psyshock does not do any damage, and Nighttime Clasher is going to advance. The next match we'll be taking a look at is actually from the Grand Finals. This is the bracket reset between Nighttime Clasher and a familiar face for those who are familiar with the Pokemon Go Championship Series, Patoman. Patoman has made 4 day 3s in a row at his past 4 international tournaments, which is just an absolutely staggering accomplishment. If there's a finals, he's almost always there. The battlers lock in for game number 1, and it's a very good lead for Patoman, leading Gyarados into Matang. I can't state enough how much of a bad team comp disadvantage Nighttime Clasher is at in this matchup, as Patoman has the combination of Medicham plus Gyarados or Medicham plus Togekiss as extremely flexible options in this matchup, and additionally, Dusknoir can beat 5 of Nighttime Clasher's 6 Pokemon. So Patoman has a ton of options, whereas Nighttime Clasher is going to have to play extremely carefully if he wants any chance. Nighttime Clasher already landed a Psyshock, correctly shields the Crunch, and now gets the shield back. Matang is very healthy, and Nighttime Clasher intends to keep it that way. He's double shielding Matang. Patoman is pretty low. He's going to pivot out into the Turtonator. Turtonator now going to be answered with Dugong. Turtonator with Ember is extremely spammy, and he's going to be firing off the Dragon Claw. Nighttime Clasher already burned both Protect Shields for this match. Dugong, no shields left to hide behind, is going to have to absorb that damage. Patoman locking in as much damage as he can before a potential debuff, just going to fire off the Brutal Swing, and this pacing on Ember Turtonator is just absolutely crazy. Now that Pato has thrown all his energy, Nighttime's going to look to lock in damage with the Drill Run, but Patoman sniffs it out, and he puts up the shield. Patoman not going to make it to the Dragon Claw, instead going to fire off the Brutal Swing. Dugong now has the Drill Run. Does Patoman try and go for the catch? Brutal Swing is going to land. He goes for the catch. Nighttime waits. In comes Gyarados, answered by Oranguru. Gyarados does not get the Aqua Tail, and that's a big swing of momentum for Nighttime Clasher, as he has an extremely healthy Oranguru. Back in comes the Turtonator. Turtonator farming up energy, going to try and make it to the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing will not KO the Turtonator, but it will be getting that Turtonator pretty low. Looks like the Turtonator is going to be outside of 1 confusion range. Patoman going to opt for the harder hitting Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw is going to land onto Oranguru. Confusion down from this Oranguru, and in comes Medicham. Medicham going to be immediately hit with the Trailblaze. Nighttime Clasher trying to boost up his attack stat as much as he possibly can. Medicham is very bulky, so he needs as much damage as possible. Dynamic Punch fired off by Patoman. That means the second confusion will not register, as Oranguru will get KO'd. If you remember from earlier, Nighttime Clasher, he preserved his Matang. And by keeping his Matang above 50% HP, it is not in Dynamic Punch range. And that is actually what should win the game here for Nighttime Clasher, as Nighttime Clasher is going to make a second Psyshock, taking the knockout. Patoman never threw his energy because he knew Dynamic Punch would not KO. Nighttime Clasher, despite a very tough lead, is able to fight back and take the win. We move to the next match. Decent lead for Nighttime, Dugong into Gyarados. Pato's going to safe switch into the Medi, getting aggressive, but he gets punished with the Matang counter swap. If Nighttime Clasher didn't have the Matang in the back, this Medicham is an incredibly free save switch, but Nighttime Clasher made the prediction that Medicham save switch was coming, and he has the perfect answer in Matang. Taking a look in the back, Patoman has brought the Turtonator, but it's going to be the Gyarados in the back for Nighttime Clasher. It looks like Nighttime Clasher, in this absolutely miserable matchup, he's going to have to make some team reads. And it looks like his team read was spot on. Dynamic Punch lands, that's going to be getting Matang very low, but the double resistant Psycho Cuts just do so little damage that Pato really can't ever farm down. Pato's going to put up the shield. He's going to try and bank some energy. So he farms up, sends in the Turtonator, no catch, and Turtonator is going to be answered with the Gyarados. Turtonator's down a shield, and it's in a matchup that it does not like to be in. No bait here from Turtonator, looking to land some damage with the Dragon Claw, but at the last second, Nighttime Clasher puts up the shield, and he's going to keep an extremely healthy Gyarados. Gyarados does get the back-to-back Aqua Tails. Turtonator is quite bulky, so Turtonator should be able to hang on here. Turtonator survives, goes for the Dragon Claw, but loses charge attack priority to that Gyarados, and that puts Patoman in a very difficult situation. Patoman now going to have to give up a shield if he wants to land this Dragon Claw onto the Gyarados, and Nighttime Clasher chooses to let it go. Nighttime knows there's a ton of energy available on this Medicham. Dragon Claw is going to land, Gyarados is going to get that farm down, and now it's Gyarados versus Gyarados. He's just going to go for the Aqua Tail, not wanting to risk trying for a crunch because it looks like he would have got farmed down. The Aqua Tail chip will definitely be beneficial, and in comes Dugong. Dugong farming up, trying to get to a charge attack, gonna get to the Icy Wind. No Protect Shields left to hide behind for Pato Man. Gyarados should hang on, but it's not going to be by much. The Icy Wind is going to put him deep into the red. There's the switch, and in comes Medicham. Medicham has a ton of loaded energy, and the important thing for Pato Man is Pato Man reset the debuff, and he banked a ton of energy because he's going to need back-to-back charge attacks to take home this win. Dynamic Punch coming out from Pato Man. This is going to be connecting onto the Dugong. Dugong very low, but leaves with the Icy Wind loaded. In comes the Gyarados. Pato Man has the back-to-back Aqua Tails. He needs this Aqua Tail to knock out. Can Dugong hang on? It's going to be very close. Aqua Tail does not KO. Dugong hangs on with a sliver of HP, and Dugong will KO Gyarados. Pato Man, despite the bad alignment, almost found a way to pull off a miracle win, but he falls just short. Hopping into the next game, and what a disaster of a lead. Medicham into Dusknoir, and it gets even worse. Nighttime Clasher completely disrespected the Dusknoir with this line, and now he's getting punished. He led Medicham lead with Dugong and Metang in the back. That is triple weak to Noir. Noir fires off Dynamic Punch. That would be big damage onto the Dugong, so Dugong puts up the shield. Pato Man gonna no-shield the Icy Wind. It doesn't do a lot of damage, and he will be able to get to a second Dynamic Punch. This Dynamic is debuffed, but Dugong is gonna take huge damage. Nighttime Clasher forced a double shield, trying to protect as much HP on the Dugong as possible, and out comes the Gyarados. The fact that it's Gyarados that answered here, Nighttime Clasher is now aware that it is going to be the Togekiss in the back. He banks all the energy on the Dugong, and he's going to pivot into the Medicham. Medicham going to be hit with Aqua Tail after Aqua Tail in this matchup. Nighttime Clasher going to be firing off Ice Punch. Pato Man still not going to use a Protect Shield. He's going to save both Protect Shields in this match for later. Gyarados going for the Aqua Tail. But Aqua Tail, we saw the damage it did the first time. It's not going to take the knockout. This should allow Medicham to hang on. Medicham going to make the Ice Punch. Pato Man has to decide, is it worth shielding and going for a farm down? Pato Man says yes. He's going to shield. Nighttime wants the combo into the Dugong, but it's a catch by Pato Man. Pato Man reads the combo play, catches onto the Dusknoir. What a dazzling play from Pato Man. The undercharge by Nighttime, he is going to get that farm down. Pato Man has energy available on the Gyarados and a full health Togekiss. He is going to wait down the timer, bring in the Gyarados, and Gyarados will immediately be hit with the Icy Wind. Icy Wind is going to be grabbing the final shield from that Gyarados. With all shields down in the match, suddenly that Metang for Nighttime Clasher looks absolutely deadly, as Metang will get to land big super effective damage onto the Togekiss with Gyro Ball. Perfect overfarm from Pato Man, CMP tying Crunch to the Icy Wind. In comes Medi, answered with the Togekiss. There's the reveal. It's Metang in the back. Pato Man will get to do some pretty solid neutral damage with the Aura Sphere, but the important thing to note is that 2 Aura Spheres will not take the knockout. Even with the Pex, Metang will be able to hang on. Here's the moment of truth. Gyro Ball is a big super effective attack into the Togekiss. Gyro Ball lands. Togekiss hangs on. That's heavy damage, but it's not enough. Pato Man will get to his second Aura Sphere, and this is going to put the Metang very, very low. This endgame, it's going to be a 50-50. Both Pokemon will have charge attacks loaded. Pato wins CMP. Does Nighttime go for the catch? No! Pato predicts the catch. He throws the Dragon Breath. Nighttime Clasher clicks Psyshock. Psyshock KOs the Gyarados. And Nighttime Clasher is your 2026 Pokemon Go Latin America International Champion. This tournament represented the first ever limited meta in competitive Pokemon Go history. And now that the dust has settled after the tournament, personally, I view this as a massive success. This was a very condensed meta, in that even though there were hundreds of Pokemon allowed, there were probably 6 to 10 Pokemon that were just simply better than the rest. However, these Pokemon, for the most part, all had very neutral play into each other. Trainers were obviously free to run whatever they'd like, so trainers could think outside the box, but typically if you thought outside the box, then you wouldn't have as flexible of play, and it would end up feeling a little bit more alignment focused. So even though it was a very condensed meta and a lot of the teams were the same, to me this was probably the most technical and skill intensive tournament we've ever had. And to me, as someone who commentates some of these tournaments in North America, I honestly thought this tournament was incredible. They did announce there's going to be a second limited meta for the European Internationals, which I believe will be coming up here in February, and I cannot wait to see how that tournament unfolds. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Home Slice Henry, and this is More Slice Henry, my second channel where I cover content related to the Pokemon Go Championship Series. If you enjoy watching content like that, please do leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you have not, and I'll see you next week.